Colin.
Yeah, Colin.
So, hey guys, if you didn't make it along to tonight's meeting, this is Charmaine from Rainforest Writing Retreat. And tonight we have a special workshop. We have Yvonne. Yvonne, please tell me how you pronounce it. Is it Gluyas or?
Yes, it's Gluyas. So it's like
Gluyas.
Lewis with a G at the front of it.
Yep, Gluyas.
Yes,
yeah, sorry,
good.
Yvonne. We have Yvonne Gluyas with us tonight, who's going to take us through some poetry activities, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So, you know, if you're watching along from home, you can have a go at these activities and maybe even share them on our Facebook page if you want to. We'd love to see them. And yeah, so I could actually give a bit of an intro for Yvonne about how she is incredibly creative with her poetry. She's very much, in my opinion, a free spirit with her style of poetry. And yeah, she does what feels right. That's the vibe I'm getting from her. And Yvonne has been involved in so many poetry organisations. She's currently involved in Write Online Toastmasters, which is Toastmasters for Writers. She's organised poetry events in Tasmania and is part of poetry clubs and organisations in Australia. So, Yvonne, how about you give us a little bit of a blurb about what you do? Because you know better than I do.
Oh, great. That's what I do. My little bit of that, well, how did I get into poetry? I mean, isn't that something that at school you thought, oh, no, you know? Or you heard grandfather doing the Man from Snowy River. But how I got into it was absolutely, totally different from that. I was working in China as a journalist for the Chinese government. Yep, you heard right. And so I thought, oh, I'll come back to Australia and I'll do a creative writing degree, seeing I've already, you know, done a bit of creative writing in China for the last 3.5 years. And I was sitting at home saying, oh, yeah, I worked for a newspaper in Australia and my first degree was in journalism. I was sitting at home one day and my friend rocked up and she said, hey, Yvonne, do you want to go to a poetry reading tonight? And I went, no. How boring. And she said, oh, it'll be great fun. I went, mm-hmm. And she, you know, and she said, and I said, oh, yeah, right. Mm-hmm. And she said, they meet in a pub. And I went, oh, okay, I'll go for one drink. And I guess, and that was a long time ago. And then I found out that, well, poetry was actually creative, was actually fun. And I, from there, realised that I can be me. I can be the Yvonne you see in front of me. And there was a form of poetry which I only just discovered, everybody else knew about for many years, which is called slam poetry, which is performance work. And I started doing a few silly poems. This is totally not academic stuff. Oh, one of them was about my cat that speaks Catanese. It's on YouTube. Look up Yvonne Gluyas. My cat speaks Catanese. Anyway, there were these competitions going called the Australian Poetry Slam. And I entered because money. There was money involved, i.e. they paid you, you didn't pay them. Not only that, but if you got so good at it that you were the top 2 people in Tasmania, you got flown to Sydney and put up in a hotel and given workshops, and you performed at the Opera House. And I went, oh, yeah, that's me. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so I managed to win this thing for 3 years. And then the person organising it in Tasmania wanted to take a bit of a break or step out, had so many other things on his plate that I was asked to take over. So since then, I've been mentoring poets in poetry slam, in performance poetry, but also at the same time attending workshops, which is very precise poetry writing, to actually learn what I should have learnt from the beginning, which is how to write poetry, not just be the mad Yvonne, get up on stage and win money. And so how to actually understand the terminology in poetry and to write stuff that was meaningful. And that's what I've been doing. Yes. And oh yeah, I'm also on the board, the management committee of the Tasmanian Poetry Festival. So anyone you're around here this September, rock on down to Tasmania, come and see me on stage. But anyway, so yeah, so I just basically put poetry into my life. So
Amazing.
And did
Yeah.
my master's in creative writing. That's
Yes, lots of fun. Best
Lots of
thing to
fun.
study. I mean,
Absolutely.
other people are studying science and saying
engineering or
there's so
something,
much
or
work.
accounting. Oh,
Yeah,
dear.
and the same. And they're like, "What do you have to do for yours?" I'm going to write a story.
Yeah, oh, mine was. Oh, you got to write a novel, and yes. And then when I professed that I didn't know how to write a novel, Anyway, that was another step. But poetry. So that's where I'm coming to you today, and I've met Charmaine and Chris on Zoom over the last year, hasn't it been?
Yeah.
Yes, because I am involved on a Zoom Toastmasters Club. More about that later. So what I'm going to get you to do, everybody here, is not just yet, but sort of get a bit. You need a pen and paper in front of you. Because my what do you call it? Leader byline said from the pen to the page. So you need a pen, no, not your laptopy thing. You need a real pen so you can cross things out and everything like that.
Don't write on your computer
Debbie's
screen.
going to eat. Oh, I've got some cake here too. I can eat that too, but I'll catch up to you later. But first of all, I just want to ask people to, put your microphones on. Why would you want to be a poet? So, I mean, I've got a couple of answers. I did it for money, but why would anyone want to be a poet? Who's not taught? Oh, Frank, why do you think that you'd like to do some poetry, to actually write something?
There we go.
Oh, Frank.
I'm not even sure I can unmute myself.
Oh, no, you're there.
Yeah.
We can, yep.
Yeah. Oh, well, I identify as a poet.
That's wonderful.
That is what I write.
I'm going to grill you later.
Yeah, that is what I write. I don't do prose, and I don't do novels.
Excellent. So I'm going to stay on Frank for a split second longer. Frank, what style do you specialise in? Slam poetry, bush poetry, lyric? You have something that I'll tell everyone else a bit later about it, but just get me now.
Well, there's a couple of things. One is that I write pretty much exclusively in free verse.
Mm-hmm.
And I identify as a storyteller. So genres and subgenres don't have much meaning for me. I have written across memoir. I'm just about to publish into speculative fiction in poetry form.
Yes.
It's where the next piece of interest takes me that governs what's written about.
I'll give you a couple of points to where you might start looking at. And Chris.
Yeah, I just wanted to put in that you've actually heard one of his poems that I read to the Toastmasters group. Yeah,
that was great.
Yes. Thank you,
Frank's
Frank.
story. Yeah.
Thank you, Frank.
And I have to jump into, because Frank wrote a whole book of amazing poetries about the fires in Victoria.
Oh, yes.
Ash Wednesday.
And so they were just amazing. So he might do memoirs, but he also does biographies. He also does, fantasy, sci-fi.
That's what he's just talking about speculative.
Frank does it all.
Yeah.
We're amazed by his.
I'm writing the Ukrainian war at the moment.
Yeah, look, that's
of course you are.
Yeah. Is it a little bit? Is it subtitled War and Peace, or And
it's the little people's stories.
It's the little one.
That's what interests me.
So who else hasn't got their mic? Oh no, they'll have to grab it. But Raylene, what do you like about poetry? What are you interested in? What's your little thing that
Actually doing poetry this semester at uni.
Oh, wonderful.
I like the imagery and the rhythm and the lyric kind of thing that you can get from poetry. I struggle to respond creatively in a poem.
We'll get you.
She got us
an hour.
She got us to introduce ourselves by writing a limerick,
Yep, right. Yeah.
That was all right.
That's right.
She now wants me to keep a journal.
A journal. That's
And respond.
I like her already.
Yeah, she's great. She's great. I've had her for other English subjects too. And in that journal, we've got to respond to one of the readings for the week.
Right.
And I'm finding yeah, I'm going to have to wait for the tutorials. I can't do that beforehand.
No.
I'm finding I don't respond.
Okay, let's see if we can spark you up a
Yeah,
little bit.
like I don't respond to poetry or
About
and poetically, if you know what I
So
mean.
you're saying that you're treating it very against what Frank's saying. You're treating it very academically.
Yeah, that could be true.
And I just fell into it without even knowing what a iambic pentameter was. But anyway, now Chris, you've got your microphone off. Tell me why would you look at even writing a one poem? Why would you look at doing poetry?
So I suppose I've written poetry my whole life, just for me and for my family and stuff. But just recently, and I find when I write poetry, I write in rhyme, which is terrible because I don't get the meters, like the iambic meters.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. So hold that thought.
But also because I've written a picture book and it has rhyming in it. So
isn't it ideal? It is.
It is. It's brilliant. Yeah. I'm really loving it. So I'm really excited about tonight.
Oh, goody. Oh, good. So am I. Martin. Is it Martin Clancy? But it's got the wrong name here.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just updating it.
You just update it. That's okay. Anyway, the poet known as Martin Clancy.
Sorry, what was the question?
Why do you even want to write a poem?
Oh, I think it's personally, I find it the easiest way to be very creative and kind of metaphorical about things. Like I really enjoy playing with people's perceptions and stuff like that.
Yes, there's a lot of there's some really great poets that do that. Really good. And Robin, I haven't heard from you.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you? Yeah, good to be here.
Yes, here I am all the way in Tasmania. And where are you?
I'm just north of Brisbane.
Whoa, gosh. And have you written much poetry, and why do you want to?
I wrote a lot of poetry when I was younger, and at times in my life where emotions were big, I've done poetry.
Yes.
It's not something I've done for a while.
Right, good. Next. Yeah, that's that. And while means within the next hour. Debbie! Debbie, tell me about your poetry.
So my mother's a bush poet.
Good.
She doesn't.
We'll explain that term to anyone who doesn't know it later on. Yep.
So she has always done that, and even as a kid, like we'd be in the car and she'd play rhyming games. You know, it'd be like, I see a tree. Oh, look at me! Like we'd always do that.
Yes.
I think it's in my DNA, but I don't necessarily write poetry. When I was starting out writing, I did like a few picture books with rhyme and stuff like that, just because it's something that I do, but it's not my go-to thing. But I'm probably more moving into, if I did do poetry, as Frank said, probably more in the free verse now rather than the actual
rhyme,
because I'm a little bit like Chris. I can't always get the meter right for rhyme, but I still rhyme.
We'll get your iambics going in a minute. So
yeah, I'm something to do.
Catherine, that's a great name. That's a great name for an author, isn't it? Can't you see that on a book?
Ironically, I write under a different name. But I write poetry because I can't not. I've written it as long as I can remember. And I have developed more into slam poetry.
Yep.
What
state are you in? In Queensland?
I'm in Townsville. North Queensland.
Yeah, okay.
I do all of that stuff through Instagram and YouTube. And
get into a slam. I'll get you later. Go into one of the slam heats when they come around next year.
But I started in bush poetry. My granddad gave me a lot of Henry Lawson and Benjamin Batson, and then my early roots in slam was Pam Ayres.
Oh yes. Now, if anyone doesn't know Pam Ayres, she's a classic. Our Australian classic person who had a big show on the ABC. I ended up taking over. That's not quite the right word, but anyway, a poet's breakfast that he was doing at folk festivals is a guy called Phil Rush. And Phil Rush does a lot of the very much rhyming, very much bush, and very much focused work. So if you like Pam Ayres is funny. Just see if you can see anything of the old work of Phil Rush, Philip Rush. He's a Tasmanian. That's just worthwhile looking up. And for the modern day slam poets, please look on YouTube and look up Ariel Cottingham. And it's Ariel, Arielle, Ariel Cottingham. She was born in America, so she has an American accent. She's currently living in Germany. The piece you're looking for on YouTube, I don't have to explain anything about slam poetry. I'm not even going to. I'm just going to tell you, when you go away from here, please look up Ariel Cottingham. You want the piece that she's doing at the Opera House when she won the national reading a poem called Hurricanes. Any of her stuff's good, but you need that. I was in the audience for that and I cried. Anyway, so I won't even explain what slam poetry is, but it's extreme performance work. But what we're looking at now is, why would a writer who isn't a poet bother wasting some of their precious writing time doing poetry? You know, what it does, it actually enhances your skills in, as some people have already said here, in imagery, because it's an extremely image-based form of writing. More than a lot, even more than, say, like frank science fiction or speculative, the poetry is extremely image-based. And I can give you some samples later on. And so if you can just nail that down to get your imagery right. Now, there's a poem that I also advise you to look up, because I haven't seen it being read live. I've heard it read live and I read it. It's a poem called, and I'm not going to pronounce her name right, Unugu Kathwalker. Someone, her real name. That's it. Thank you. I was reluctant to mispronounce her name.
Right. Doing it in great English.
Yeah, great. Now, looking up a poem of hers, if you're looking at imagery and suspense and a few other things, and it's called The Totem. That's all. Do it after this. And that brings in a lot of imagery, pathos, home life, cultural stuff, and at least you're laughing. So it's called either Father's Totem or The Totem, something like that. But what she's done in that, she's told a story in the way that poetry is, which is precise and impactful. And if you could bring out any poem, that's it, The Totem or Father's Totem, something like that, Kath with a K, but her real name is that's it.
Look, I teach it too, and right. I can't say that.
No, and
I only know how to say it because the Indigenous teacher aide that we have at school came in and did a big thing with our kids, and she made me sit down and learn it. Because every time I saw her make a mistake, so she was very determined.
Very determined that you get the name.
To learn how to say it. So
say it properly. Yes. Yeah. So look at that one later on.
I think I'm right. That's how she said to say it. So I'm blaming her if I'm wrong.
Well, you blame her. No, we'll do that one. And as someone else mentioned here about emotions, is that what poetry can do is to get you to connect with emotions in a very, tangible way, because you've got no plot to hide behind. What you've got is sparse words. When you have written that poem, what you've gone in and killed your darlings. You've written a lot. I'll go into that bit later on. The Ballad of the Totems. That's what it is. It's called the Ballad of the Totems. Yes, Charmaine. Yes, it is. So for people listening to this later on, just please don't read it read it. If I hear you laughing, I know you read it over my shoulder. Leave it for an hour and then go and read it anyway. But there, as people have said here, there's a number of different types of poetry. And I've written a big long list here on another thing that I do about. I'm just going to find where I've got my whole big list of them. Where have I written that whole thing? Oh, it's on this one over here. That's it. There's 100. I've got 15 forms of poetry down here. No, you're not going to learn all of them. But the ones that most people get into in poetry is narrative and lyrical. The olden days, what used to be called blank verse is now called free verse writing, but even in free verse, it's best to have a consistent rhyme or reason through it. I'll read one or two of mine a bit later on, and I break those rules because as Charmaine said, I can do whatever I like. And I do a lot of my work, I do it for emotion. I do it so that the audience, because I do a lot of like on stage stuff, which is, and even when you're reading my stuff, I want you to go, oh, at the end of it. And later on, when I'm not here, look up Yvonne Gluyas on YouTube. And I was asked to do a series of 3 poems for a school. And there's a lot of other stuff in there, but just those 3 are the best ones. And one of them I did purely, I wrote it through a workshop. I was in a workshop at a poetry festival, attending the workshop, not attending the workshop. And the person running the workshop wanted us to concentrate, sit in the room, think of something that you can hear and you can see and bring the emotions around it. And what I wrote that day was absolutely total utter rubbish. And then I killed off 90% of what I had written that day and came out with a poem, which I now have filmed, and it's called Jude and Leo NICU. The children in it are called Jude, J-U-D-E, and Leo, and then it's got the letters NICU, Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. And that's me reading it. So you'll see from that why I doctored that poem, literally, for emotion. And that's and another one in that series I did on Winter in Beijing. That was a style of poem. I've got them all here, but I won't read them out. You're going to look them up. And Winter in Beijing, I just did 4 or 5 verses, and I said, Winter in Beijing is, and a few words. And I tied them all together so that the Winter in Beijing, I've got Winter in Beijing is this, and this, and I'm reading it in my house, in front of some of my Chinese stuff with a Chinese jacket on. And the other one I did in that series was another one that I started off with on it. See, all you can do this is to start writing prose. Find a situation, I'll go a little bit later on, and just write a big block of prose about it. Just take a short story you've written, a short story, no, long short story, and start cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting and slashing and burning. And if you've got another friend who can help you with it, hand it over to them and let them do a bit more slashing and burning. And I had a short story written, which turned into the poem, which is called Give the Kid a Tablet. And that's also on that set of 3. So if you look up Yvonne Gluyas YouTube, yes, you'll see Give the Kid a Tablet, Winter in Beijing, and Jude and Leo NICU. So going on from that is that, I'm moving some of my bits of paper over. So what's poetry? What is it? It's a way of stringing words together. Now, we all do that. We're all writers. We all string words together. In poetry, you want the strings to be invisible, totally invisible. And I think Frank here, I'm pointing to you, when he was talking about the fiction that he writes, I think sometimes in the background, you want the strings to be totally visible. You want to lead the reader in and bring them along on a journey and lead them out again, so they're still with you. But in poetry, because you're killing your darlings a little bit, try to make the strings a little bit invisible. Don't give it all away. You've got a sparse amount of words. Start slashing and burning, of course. But if you're going to start writing a poem, don't say, oh, I'm going to start with the first line. There was movement at the station. Now what comes next? Don't do that. Start writing this block of prose about, look, I was on this hillside once, there's this whole bunch of blokes got up and there's this horse there, and then, oh gosh, and then rearrange it. Don't just put some of the middle bit, go back and see what would make a good first line. I think any writers down here on my screen in here would have done that with a lot of their short stories and longer stories too. What you thought, you don't start with Call Me Ishmael, you just start with a story and then start, chopping it out. You might start with a phrase that you've heard that you want to incorporate into it. And but one good way of saying, how can I write a poem? Very easy. Got your bits of paper out. I want you to look around the room where you are now, and I want to see, what can you see? What's going on? What can you hear? What are you thinking about? What are you imagining, you know? What do you hope for? What do you fear? And then I want you to grab your bit of paper, and unlike the limerick railing, you're going to be writing a haiku. Now, to start you off, I'm going to read two of my haikus. And a haiku started in Japan. It was extremely precise. It had to be about nature. The last line had to go back to the beginning, all of that stuff. And no need that at all. Just a haiku is a 575. Got my things out here. So the first line is 3 lines. The first line has 5 syllables, ba, 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 ba. The second has 7, ba, 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 ba. And the last one, 5, ba, 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 ba. And these are 2 that I have written before that follow no rules. And the first one I wrote was called Haiku for June, the month of June. Feeding chooks and cats who greet early morning mist, claws and paws outstretched. And the other one's for my daughter Tegan. 21 winters, I celebrate her birthday and my daughter blooms. So those are very simple. The first one was just about the chooks and cats in the garden, and the other one was straight to my daughter. I'm going to give you 5 minutes now and see if you can manage. It doesn't matter. If you want to read it, you can. If you want to throw it away, that's absolutely perfectly okay. And 5 minutes just to write something that inspires you in the room that you are in. Look around you. If you can feel something, if you hear, if you can see, is there one object in there? Does something call to you? Can you time 5 minutes, Charmaine?
Yes.
Oh, goody. Right, and give them a 4-minute warning?
Yep.
Great.
And sorry, we're writing a haiku?
Yes, you're going to write a haiku in the next 5 minutes, within this 5 minutes.
Sorry, what's the
575.
575,
so da da da
thanks.
da da, and then like in mine, 20. I wrote 21 winters, 21 winters, and the next one was 7. I celebrate her birthday, and the last one, and my daughter blooms. So
and if you forget how to count syllables, I do it this way because I can't tap it out. I have to, and when your chin hits your hand, that's another syllable because your mouth has made a new vowel sound.
people are finished. How's our minutes going?
No, when I said I'd be really good at that.
Oh, yeah, right.
We are at 6 minutes and 47
Oh, there we go.
seconds.
So we'll just wind up the 5 minutes about now. And before, you know, people can read it later on if they'd like to, but what I want to find out from people is having to do into that course, into that system, did it make you change what you're going to do? Because you had to keep it just to 5 words. Did it change what you thought you were going to do? The poet known as Martin Clancy, what's your real name? What's your real name?
Martin.
It is Martin? Or
Yeah.
Marty. So
Either one, yeah.
either. So Martin, what did when you started writing in the beginning, did you change something along that process and come up with something that you didn't think you were going to do because you had to keep to those 5, 7, 5s?
Not actually, because I didn't really think beforehand what I was going to do. So I wasn't expecting it, but I wasn't expecting it.
Excellent. I didn't want anyone to expect it.
Excuse me, was it 5 syllables or 5 words?
No, well, it's 5 syllables. Like it's like in one of mine, I say my daughter. So that's 3, not 2.
Because you just said.
Oh, did I? Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
it's okay. I
Please,
thought,
no, wait, blank it out. Get the white out onto it. You know, yeah, sorry about all that.
syllables, got it.
Yes, 5 syllables, like, yes. As I say, I'm not classically trained. That's what, so a lot of the background knowledge that all you have done had a classical education and not chucked into a working class school in an Air Force base like I got. And Debbie, what did you think of what you came up with in the end?
I do this with the kids at school.
Yeah, good.
Anyway,
yeah,
so,
now you know what it's like. Yep.
So I actually find haikus pretty easy.
Yes.
But everything else I find really hard.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying they're great.
That's why I started at a haiku, because I wasn't sure if anybody had some background in that. And so as you said, it is something you can do when you're shopping in the supermarket.
Yeah, I seem to do them for.
Yes, and I sometimes think in haikus when I'm doing that, you know.
That's not to say they're any good.
No, it doesn't matter. No. So Robin, what did you, when you were going through it, what did you think?
Well, my puppy just ran away with the tea towel. And I had to get up and get it back.
You can turn that very much into a poem. I can go on.
So I wrote about my puppy.
Excellent. That's the way to do it. That's it. Yeah. And Frank, have you attacked haikus before in your?
Yes, I have, and
yes.
I have to make a confession. I've got a long-standing allergy to them. I won't write them. What I do though is I write 17-syllable free verse, and I've done that.
Right. Okay. Right. As I said, we can do whatever we like, can't we? So, Raylene, did you find that hard to do, or was that okay? With what
that was really simple. I was actually
Excellent.
in a haiku group.
Oh, see,
right.
that's yes.
Yep. I feel very inexperienced in this group.
Isn't it wonderful though that they've all got this background that they can do it? And I was talking to who was it earlier about the other way other than a haiku. Does anyone want to read out what they wrote? If we've got a couple of people want to put their hands on who wants to read it. Oh, look, Tatum, can you want to read what you did just now?
not overly interesting, but I'll read it.
No, just yeah, never apologize. Never, never, never.
I'm starved for cool. Dry air hunts my hungry soul and drowns me in heat.
It's great.
That's great. That's yeah. Who's game to follow that? I've got another person that would like to follow that.
I'll do.
Go, Chris.
I'll go. I've never written a haiku in my life, so here we go. Ready? And I'm looking at everywhere, and I went, oh, it's cold, wet, and sweet.
Yes.
Condensation droplets bulge, head fuzzy, grateful. Ooh, that's my wife.
Now that's yes, but isn't that great that you can just whip that out because you're keeping to a formula? I didn't just say, can you write a poem about your wine? You were keeping to a formula, and sometimes it's much easier to write to a formula. I have been challenged to write sonnets and villanelles. So everyone who knows a lot more about that will know the formula for writing sonnets and villanelles. And at first I just went, oh, look, is there a rock I can hide under? And once I realised there was actually a scientific and mathematical formula to it. A sonnet's 14 lines and all that. Yeah, there's the repeats in it. That once you're attacking, like a haiku, which is to start with, to attack, the next thing to attack is a villanelle and or a sonnet. And in the same thing, just, you know, a sonnet was supposedly, you know, Shakespeare and all that, about love. But, you know, we can break rules. We don't have to write them about love. We don't have to have the last 2 lines going back and looking at themselves. But just, you know, most of you have studied what a sonnet and a villanelle is. So it'd be a good challenge for you is to expand on what you did in your haiku and see if you can use your emotions a little bit more, expand slightly, and get a villanelle or a sonnet out of it. Shemaine's is now doing what I did.
Good at this.
I'm not going, you got me, you know, but it doesn't matter. And the sonnet, 14 lines, sometimes about love, and it's got internal rhymes within their 14 lines. So it's actually a formula in that. And the villanelle is 19 lines, but it's got a 5 and a quatrain, which is highly specialised internal rhymes. This is something to really study them. The most well-known villanelle is Dylan Thomas's "Do Not Go Gentle into That Dark, Dark Night." As you can see, he's repeated that phrase again and again, and that's a classical villanelle. But that takes something, you know, for you to do some self-study and see if you can challenge yourselves to turn your work into a sonnet and or a villanelle. Now we'll go into the what I was talking about earlier is the good old, I've got to remember how to pronounce it, like spelling my name, iambic pentameter. I think I got that right first time. Penta is 5. And iambic, I think it has something with hearts because it's supposed to sound like a heartbeat. And what it is a typical da-dum, 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 which a lot of poetry follows. Frank, bush verse. A lot of that will follow. You don't even realise you're doing it, but it's the 5. There's another thing to watch out if you're doing that is to make sure that you're not being boring and using too many cliches and too many expected rhymes, the moon, spoon, June type rhyming. And I've got a couple of examples here that which are iambic pentameter and rhyming couplets. A rhyming couplet means the last word on the first line and the second line are rhyming. And the most famous one, of course, is Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jump over the candlestick. Now, if you do that, Jack, I can't do it with my fingers, but anyway, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jump over the candlestick is that form. And then a few other ones that other people have written, which can be a little bit predictable in the thing is, I saw a little hermit crab, his colouring was oh so drab. And when I listen to a lot of badly written bush verse, I'm waiting for the, dog rhymes with horse rhymes with Billy that comes along, because a lot of that is too predictable. So the challenge in doing rhyming couplets is not do a predictable rhyme. Like someone's got here, what have I got in here? It's hard to see the butterfly because he flies across the sky. A little bit predictable. And I tire of writing poems and rhyme. I think I need vacation time. So that's if every single poem you write is a rhyming couplet and iambic pentameter, people will not want to listen to you after a while. They won't want to read your work because it will look boring on the page. And if you're reading it to a group, you'll get, if you've done it more than 3 or 4 times before, you will be considered very predictable. So try to break a mold. I think picking on poor Frank again, I just remember that he said that he's got a lot of strings to his bow. And you can mix and match a lot of the stuff you do, but you need to know that is the most classic form of poetry writing, is that the fire. It's supposed to be the beat of your heart. Da 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 da. And well, I suppose it's comforting, it's the
Frank actually nails that. Frank has one of the best beats that I've ever read.
Oh, really?
I actually have a question, because I can't remember. I think I've heard before, but I can't remember.
Yes.
So I know that I think it can vary, but how many, like you're talking about beats, and I think you mean syllables when you say beats, is it the same? I mean, I'm checking that I'm meaning the right thing. So a beat is like the syllables. Roughly, is there a number, or is it as long as the 2 lines are the same? Or do they not need to be the same?
No, if you're doing an iambic pentameter, it has to be 5, which is 10. It's
10 syllables.
It's 10 syllables. Yeah, I use the wrong terminology, but the children like the ocean shore. We want to leave, but they want more.
So that's which is 8, I think. Is shore the last word? So I think it can vary a bit. Is it?
You can vary
as long as they match.
We want to leave, but they want more. That's 5. We want to leave, but they want more. The children like 8. The ocean shore. Da 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 da. Yes. The children like. So they've got dun and like as the up downs. The children like the ocean shore.
Right.
They've done
and when you pronounce it, you pronounce a down and an up.
Yes, and a down and an up.
Right.
But as I was saying, it can be. It
can be like 8 to 10.
Oh yes, so there's a whole pile of other, those all the literary people
just
know
rough
those other words, roughly. And but not, what I don't write like that. I have a couple that I've written like that, but most of my stuff isn't like that. But it is good if you're starting to learn to write. Don't do exactly what I did. Actually try to learn the formula writing first and then break away from it. At least you've got a background then in how to expand on someone else, so the other way of doing it. Because there's lots of different forms. There's ballads. The Ballad of Reading Jail. Is it Reading Jail? There's that's a ballad. There's the pastoral poetry, which is now called bush poetry. And that mainly concerns like natural worlds, the rural life, but those poems, those bush poetry type staves, they were not invented by Banjo Paterson. They've been around since ancient Greece. That form of what we now they call them pastoral poetry, which we now call bush poetry. But that form of storytelling. That there was a booth at the station for the word had got a roam, the colt from our regret had got away and joined the wild bush horses. It's worth £1,000. That form of storytelling has been around since, much ancient times. And then I think some of my stuff falls into what we're calling narrative poetry. And that's what I think a lot of you here could expand and do a lot of narrative poetry, is it tells a story. Paul Revere's Ride, and The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. That is a story. Most of you have heard The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. This bloke's going to walking along the street, and then these people go to a wedding, and he stops and says, hey, wedding guest, wait, I've got to tell you a story. And the wedding guests go, oh, for God's sake, what now? And he says, I need to tell you the story. And he tells them the story. With my crossbow, I shot the albatross. So, but it starts off with the storytelling about how he stopped the wedding guests and told them the story. So that's sort of that narrative poetry. I think some of my stuff falls into that. And if to really encourage you to write something, really encourage you to write something, look inwards. Look into yourself. It's all in there. That's where it all is. What sort of person are you? You're all different. What sort of person are you? Write a poem in your natural speaking voice. And I think that's what I do, is that I write it in my own natural speaking voice. I'm not contrived. And that means it gives you an edge. And Tatum, you've heard a lot of, I presume, that spoken voice poetry. And the best of that is if they're in their own natural voice and they're not doing this sort of, breathy sort of, I see in front of me this shining, that sort of crap, God. Look, I'm sat there in my seats going like this when someone gets up on stage and does that sort of work. And when I've seen their work written, I could smell that sort of type of writing in it. Be your own natural self. Don't try to be somebody else. Don't really try. And another big thing to do is to create tension. In mine, sometimes I create tension, which is a little bit understated. And like those ones, the Jude and Leo one, you'll see where the tension is. It's only a very short one, and literally I did start that in a workshop. And it wasn't what I ended up with, but it was very contrived. And or else you can do something. I'm going to find it over here. The one that I did recently as an exercise. No, I did it for myself, but I was in a workshop, and what I was trying to do, it was about meter and syllable. So this is what, so saying I'm not trained in that. I had to be taught to use meter and syllable in my poetry while keeping my own voice and keeping my own story. And you can all do that easily, And so meter is the stresses in words. That's where I get the words wrong. That's it, yes. And so what I had to do was a pattern to be set up was that there was 5 stresses, in the first line. No, in the first line there was a certain number, and the second verse, it looks like that. It's not there. But in the first line, I've got 12. I go 12, 8, 10, 8. And in the second, 12, 8, 10, 8. Unbelievable to the way I work, it actually rhymes. And there's an understated theme through it, which is actually stars and water, but it's understated in it. I don't, I'm a little bit more subtle. And the title, the other thing about naming, so Frank, Raylene, Martin, when you write a poem, when you choose the title of the poem, did you choose the title by taking some words out of the poem, or did you do something that referred to the poem?
In my case, almost always the poem suggests its own title.
Is the title sometimes in the poem itself?
Almost always the title will come from the poem, yeah.
Right, almost. Is it sometimes the leading line, or do you take it somewhere else?
I take it from the context of the poem.
The poem.
I'll find something in the poem that I think
excellent
introduces what's going on.
The title. So you don't start with the title and say, "Oh, the title's called My Brown Dog," and then start writing a poem.
No, sometimes the title's number 1.
Yeah.
But then followed by number 2.
So
that's true. We have poems of Frank's that are number 1, number 2.
Oh, a friend of mine has got a book of poetry, and she's got poems in it called Unrequited Love, poem number 38.
Oh.
Unrequited Love, poem number 14. Unrequited Love. And she just bungs that number on whenever she wants. It's not in any rhyme or reason. And she gets a great laugh. And when she reads this out, and when people realise that there's a theme to it, and it's a very softening theme. So yeah, number 1 and number 2. But and so what? Yeah. So I'll because I'm trying to do something. How I've done this one. What I was trying to do was a series of different stress patterns held together by syllable counts. So what it is I call the poem Floating, because the word floating isn't in there, but it refers to being rootless, being not tethered. And so I've got, the background is I was walking with a friend near a river in Hobart. So then I've got here, I plucked the golden wattle from the river's edge and tucked a sprig into your hand. Ahead, the wooden jetty beckons us, starfish curled amongst rocks and sand. Like abandoned sea life, we are lost in the waves of life's currents that ebb and flow. Today, we sip our coffee, reminisce. Tomorrow, the dog star hangs low. And the technical mistakes in that is that I refer to golden wattle, which is August, especially down here in Tasmania, and the dog star, which I've referred to, does not hang low. It's Cirrus. That's Cirrus. It doesn't hang low in the southern hemisphere in August. So
in saying that, do you actually say that it's in Tasmania? Because it could be anywhere in the world.
There you go.
So it doesn't matter.
Oh, I do say wattle. It gives a bit of a giveaway, but you know,
wattle could be anywhere in the world these days.
I don't know.
But that's so you can change, you know, sort of things that can suit you as you want. So I have got a couple of different poems about wattle, so it just amuses me. But it's that. So go back to Raylene now. Raylene.
Yeah.
What can you write a poem about anything? Do you think that you could go and write a poem about anything at all?
Yeah, probably.
Right.
Go on.
Okay,
we'll type you.
Go on. No, not right now. I am not telling her to do it right now. I am not going to do that. I'm just trying to find something here. I am not going to do that to her.
Wine. It comes out easier when you're drinking.
No. There's a poem that I did write about anything, and this is the thing about putting your own voice in it and using place and circumstances to do something, is I was in a cafe a year ago, a few months ago, pre-COVID, you know, we could sit in cafes, and the woman who I'd met before serving in the counter, bringing my cups of tea over, said, "Oh, hi, Yvonne, how's the poetry going?" And I went, "Oh, great. Yeah, really good. You should come to the next, you know, whatever we're doing." Yeah, that one sort of thing. And then she said, "Oh, you're so clever." I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "I wrote a poem once." And I went, "Oh, did you?" And then she told me a story, and I put it in a poem. And the story, the poem was called "You Can Write a Poem About Anything." And it has got a sort of a sad ending. But what she did, she told me a story, and I just stole that whole story, and I, you know, imagined a couple of small things in it. But the story she told me was when she was a child living on a farm with her father, a whole pile of brothers. She asked her father to put a door on the toilet, and he laughed at her. He said, "You don't need a door on the toilet. We don't need a door in the toilet." And then she was learning poetry at school that day. So she wrote a poem begging him to put a door on the toilet. She was 12 years old. Her father thought she was so clever that he gave the poem to her teacher, who read it out in front of the class. And she said to me, it's the last lines I've got here, she said, "I wish he hadn't given it to my teacher. I can't remember how it went now, that poem that I wrote when I was 12. I haven't written another poem since."
Oh.
Yeah, oh, that's what you're supposed to do. So I get up on stage and do this, and people are laughing all the way through and about the toilet door and writing a poem. And then I stand there and I go, and I haven't written another poem since. And that's how I ended it. And I did have another verse on the bottom of that, and a friend of mine said, mate, no, get out, get rid of it. You have to end on that. So that's where I used a situational thing to actually write a poem.
So are you saying like leave a poem on an emotion?
Oh, shit, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, leave them crying, leave them laughing. Oh, Tadam's going. Yeah, leave them laughing or leave them crying. Some of mine I don't. I don't leave them, I'll be boring and predictable if I did that all the time. But I have another one I wrote about my grandparents' table, and the last line was babies grow, grandparents age, and tables have the power to let memories be born again. And that's a sort of is that a nice one? But and I could have ended up with it. I could have gone on a bit more and said, oh yeah, and that table ended up. Nah, forget it. End. And this is written work as well. What you're doing is enhancing. You're bringing your readers something, and you want them to walk away going, oh, I just got something. They may have got an emotion. They may have cried. They may have, like the father's totem, made you laugh, and or something like that, or cry. But yes, I think leaving people on an emotion is a good thing to do. Debbie, have you written anything, and a poem or something that you believe leaving an emotion at the end of it was the right thing to do, or could you change something now to add that?
I don't know. I don't write a lot of poetry sometimes, but when I
not yet.
No, I do, but but no one really reads it. I think
no, you don't know. The audience of one is fine.
Yeah, like a lot of my stuff is more of I think sometimes some venting, because I live alone and I teach teenagers. And I have a horrendous taste in men, and with this.
Now, can everybody hear? We're all smiling and nodding. Would you buy the book?
Yep.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. This is my process.
Yes.
But it's one of those, I don't know, I always joke and say it's like my life's like a reality TV show, because it's just one of those comedic.
Go on maths.
No, I don't want to go on maths. Like I'd get the psychopath who'd chop me in little pieces. And
if you've got that way, just trying to think where.
But like when I write, depends on my mood. Like a lot of my poetry sometimes it can be really dark, because I've got this really dark, really, like I have anxiety and depression, and that can.
Yes, that's the
and
best
I write a lot when I'm not in a great headspace, and nobody ever reads that. But then I can also do really lighthearted and funny if I'm in that headspace. So it's it's almost bipolar. It's not.
Yes,
I don't have bipolar.
Yes,
but it's almost a bipolar in my writing of where things are, and then how I feel on the day. So sometimes, yes, it's very emotional.
Yes.
And then other times it's very lighthearted and funny, and it's like, oh, look what happened today. Of course this would happen today. So it kind of goes between the two.
Yes. So. What you could do, if you get one of those dark poems, just put it all down. It's almost like prose. Get the whole lot down.
A lot of the time I rip them up and throw them away.
No. Before you rip them and throw them away, just do an exercise with them. No one's going to see it. Doesn't matter.
Finds them, I don't want them to read them. So.
No, not going to see it. Then you've got to shred it. Put them in that before it goes in the bin. Yeah, matches work really well. But next time you've got a block of next time you've got a block of what's almost prose, try to cut it so that you've got them in smaller lines. I did a block of prose once. I called it 10 teapots. It was actually 9 teapots and a billy, but anyway. And I just wrote a little bit about a teapot, and one of them I said, oh yeah, this teapot was my grandmother's, and then it was silver and I used to polish it. Then she'd put it up in the cupboard, and in the holidays, and we never used it, but she was keeping it for good. And that was a block of prose, and I chopped and I chopped and I chopped by doing that, like you're going to do with your black dog poetry, and just got it in the silver teapot sat alone, abandoned. that sort of stuff where you've just got it, and then you can start chopping it again and again and again. I ended up with 10 poems from my 10 blocks of prose about the teapots, and 2 or 3 of them referred back to each other, because I referred back to my grandmother's teapot by talking about going to a funeral. And I said, and we used the teapot. It was a special occasion. So that's the...
Because that's what would probably happen to me.
Yes. Oh, no. Oh, well, another teapot. I wrote about another teapot that one of my, as you said, bad tasting men smashed. So I did put the smashed teapot in it as well. You know, bad tasting men. You know what? I could only put this in a poem. He used that teapot to make green tea in.
Me?
One of my bad choices.
Oh,
this
I drink green
teapot.
tea all the time. Maybe that's
he used this teapot for green tea. I had a visitor, and they put chai in it.
Oh yeah, I drink that too.
He came home and he smashed the teapot against the wall.
Oh wow!
Oh, that's in a poem. Oh yeah.
That's
I wrote it like this the Black Dog poetry prose. I wrote it in a block. Yeah. The Mungal bastard. I came home with the bloody teapot, and then I started chop and chop and chop and put. And I started by just doing lines like this, and then putting the lines down. I ended up with 10 short poems, all based on teapots. And you could do it about the dog. Who had the dog with a tea towel?
Oh, that was Robin. Yeah,
Robin. Okay. Now, if you wrote 10 blocks or 5 blocks of prose about what the bloody dog's done today,
take a book.
You've already got 5. They're already here. And then start cutting. And then you put, call it something like Dog by 5. Tie it together. It can be done. It can be done. So that's what. But I must be well over time. I don't know what time it is.
That's all right. I would like to know, Yvonne, because we're going to keep chatting anyway.
Oh, good.
We will wind this up soon so that our video isn't too long. My takeaway
to everyone is to write something. Nothing is bad. Write it, then rewrite it, then kill your darlings, then rewrite it again. And if you want to throw it away, that's fine. Sometimes you look at it in a month's time, it ain't that bad.
Well, I'm going to ask you 2 things.
Yes.
And the first thing I'd like to know before we say goodbye is what's next, Yvonne? What's coming up next in the poetry world? Is there any events on this year or later or virtual events? Or
I know that I'm in Tasmania, but the Tasmania Poetry Festival has a lineup of guests coming down in between the 17th and the 20-something of September. Why? Because every year I put on a tribute concert to a great singer-songwriter poet. And in my eyes, the greatest one is the one I named my son after, Bob Dylan. So last year I hired, COVID, I had some grant money and I paid 14 local singers to interpret Bob Dylan and Joan Baez's songs. This year I'm doing Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell. I can't sing, but I can clap. So if you made it down to the Tasmania Poetry Festival, you would also get the tribute concert, which is Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell. I also have the pleasure of being involved in an online club. It was Toastmasters, but which is I've got to remember it now, 1st and 3rd Thursdays of the month, i.e. last night, and we're only there for an hour. It's all by Zoom. Charmaine's got the link. And we people talk for an hour, something to do with writing. Last night we talked about the importance of oral history in recording family history. That was our subject.
Yeah.
In a fortnight's time, I'm doing what Charmaine does. I'm having a person who's published their own book of poetry come in and talk about the journey of editing. The writing journey is a different one, but the journey from editing to publication.
Yeah. And editing their own book or?
No, well, that's the whole point. Yeah, you can't, can you? It doesn't matter how good you are. I worked as an editor for the Chinese government, and yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I will definitely put the link to the Toastmasters
next fortnight. Yes,
I will look up the link for, or if you can send me those links for those
the Tasmanian Poetry Festival later in the year.
I will pop those in the description in our YouTube and also on our Facebook page. Now, the last thing I was going to ask you is, do you have any homework for us?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, do I ever have some homework for you? A little bit what I was just saying is that I want you to take a situation in your life. A situation. It could be like I just read, walking along a riverbank with a mate. And
that would be a situation in Brisbane at the moment. If you
yes, that's right. And picking the wattle, putting it in his hand and drinking coffee. That was a very simple thing. That's all that poem was about. What about the dog star? I added a little bit of poetry. I want you to take a situation, anything that's emotional. See if you can end it on an emotion. It doesn't matter what the emotion is. Make them cry, make them laugh. And it doesn't matter what form it is, whether it's free verse, bush verse, or something in the middle of it, but a poem of some sort that covers an emotion, a situation, and ends on a takeaway, ends on someone going that, or they laugh.
Great. And guys, if you're a retreater and you have a go at this, I will put a post in our Facebook group, in our private Facebook group, that if you'd like to, as my teacher hat, we don't force you to share, but if you would like to share, even if, and to make you feel better, I'll share something woeful that I write so that you will feel wonderful about your work. But even if you're not sure about it or if it works, and then we can all sort of like brainstorm together and maybe see if we can make some of these sparkle even. Or if you just want to show off how, like the people here tonight who are poetry writers, who want to show off how lovely your poetry is, share it with us.
I think it's a wonderful
I won't feel bad
writing.
about my woeful poetry. It's okay. It won't make me feel bad. And yeah, let us share that. And before we, as I say, we'll still hang around and have a little chat. But for our people watching this later, I just want to say huge thank you, Yvonne. Tonight has been a lot of fun. I can't believe I've had so much fun. I also wrote a small haiku about inspiration and where I was finding it, pink chin, by the way. And so I had a bit of fun with that. And yeah, just huge thank you, Yvonne. So I'll say good night to you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Make sure you check out the next one we have.